Hello and welcome to English 451A. I'll be your instructor, Dr. Sam Lackey, and let's go ahead and get started. So this is part one of the week one lecture. And here I just want to provide sort of a general introduction to the class, and then in part two, we'll start talking about our first book, The Narrative of Cabeza de Vaca. Hopefully you've already purchased it, and hopefully you got this edition, the edition that I ordered. We'll talk more about that later. So here in part one, I'll keep it brief. I just want to give you guys some idea of what to expect. I mostly want to talk about our weekly schedule. So as you know, this is the first half of the 400 level American literature sequence that we offer here at GBC. Once you guys are finished taking this class with me, you'll take 451B, hopefully in the near future with Dr. Nick Cooley, and in that class you pick up where we leave off. And you make your way all the way up, or pretty close to our present sort of contemporary moment. But in this class, we start with the origins of American literature, which for us, means really the beginning of the colonial period. So we start in the 1540s with the narrative of Cabeza de Vaca, and we make our way up to roughly 1860. That's where we end right before the start of the American Civil War. So that's over 300 years. That's a lot of ground to cover, so obviously we can't cover everything. But we are going to read a lot of important texts. We're going to learn not just about American literature, but also we're going to learn about the formation of American culture. We're going to talk a lot about American history, and specifically American literary history. We're going to be tracking the development of American literature from its very early stages all the way up to the middle of the 19th century, a point at which many critics would argue that we finally had sort of a recognizable literature of our own, a national literature that we could really be proud of. There's still an ongoing debate as to whether or not that process is finished now, when it was finished, can it be finished? But certainly by the middle of the 19th century, we had some famous authors, we had some really well-known texts, and we had certain themes and genres and tropes that were kind of unique to us and our country and our culture and our history. So we're going to be tracking that process, how it worked, how it unfolds over a long period of time. So some of the authors and titles that we're going to be exploring this semester should be familiar to you. We're going to be reading Edgar Allan Poe, Herman Melville, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Ralph Waldo Emerson. These are some names that might ring a bell. Perhaps you had to read some stuff by them in some previous English class, but we're also going to be breaking some new ground. Well, at least I hope it will be new for many of us. We're going to be exploring some lesser known texts, some lesser known authors, many authors and titles that were popular in their time, but have sort of fallen into obscurity, or maybe they're just not as commonly taught in the K through 12. Maybe they've just kind of fallen out of the popular imagination for various reasons. So there's going to be a nice mixture of the familiar and the unfamiliar, stuff that we kind of know, or at least we've heard of it, and stuff that really will be brand new. So hopefully that's exciting. Hopefully everybody will find some texts and some authors over the course of this semester that they really enjoy, that they're really interested in. But I will issue a warning. This class is difficult. We are reading old texts. In some cases, these texts are a little bit difficult to get through. They're not always going to sound and feel modern. We're going to have to work a little bit harder to comprehend some of the larger ideas. Certainly harder than we would with a lot of contemporary literature, which is written in our vernacular. It has references to things that we know. With older literature, we have to just do more. Sometimes we need footnotes. Sometimes we need critical introductions provided by scholars and critics. Sometimes we need to look things up because there will be references to things that we don't know. There might be words or phrases that we don't recognize, and there'll certainly be stylistic elements that are going to prove difficult at times. So you need to be prepared for that. You need to sort of keep that in mind as the semester begins. This class does demand some patience. You need to spend a lot of time with some of these texts. And that's just the nature of a 400 level literature class. Obviously, since we're covering so much time, we have to read a lot. We have to cover a lot of ground. That will be true in 451A, and it will also be true in the second half of the class, Part B, which you take with Dr. Cooley. So I would encourage you guys to just sort of keep an open mind, but also be ready to work hard and be ready to devote a lot of time and energy to our literature. This is a literature class, so we are reading a lot of literature, and like I was saying, not all of the literature is going to be easy. So just keep that in mind. Luckily for us, the structure of the class is pretty simple, and it should be very familiar to you guys since you've been taking online English classes for a while by now here at GBC. So I follow a schedule that is at least somewhat similar to, I think, what most other instructors do. I like to think of everything on a week-by-week basis. So for me, for us, the week begins on Monday morning. That's when I post everything for that week in that week's module. So for example, if you're in Web Campus right now, hopefully you are already in the week 1 module, or at least you've already seen it. So here in week 1, I've already posted everything that you need for the week. And this is what I will do at the beginning of each week. So here are the things you can always find Monday morning at the beginning of a new week. There'll be an overview, okay? That's basically a summary of what we are doing that week in written form. So if you just click on overview, you'll be able to read it. I try to keep those brief. Again, they're pretty general and broad. They're just summaries. They don't contain a high level of detail, but they're giving you an overview of what we're covering, what we are reading, what we are talking about that week. Okay, underneath the overview, you'll see the reading assignment for that week. I always post the reading assignment and any written assignments that are due that week. You'll see those posted as well. So you should get into the habit of doing discussion posts almost every week. We generally do discussion posts every week, so you can count on that assignment. You can always find the link to that week's discussion board. But also we might have a larger assignment due that week, and if that is the case, you'll see a link to that assignment, and if you click on it, you'll be able to read the instructions. And all of our assignments are always due at the end of a week. So the week begins Monday morning, and it ends by 11:59 p.m. Sunday night. So you have a full 7-day week at your disposal to get all of the work done for that week. So that's kind of how I expect us to proceed. That week's reading assignment, it would be great if you had it finished by Sunday. Obviously, you need to turn in all of your written work by midnight on Sunday. And the other thing you'll find in the weekly modules will be my lecture videos, just like the one you're watching now. So the sequence that I would sort of like you guys to embrace is, tackle the reading for the week first. Try to get as much of the reading done as you can before you watch my lectures. With the exception of this first lecture, which again is just an introduction, generally speaking, I structure these so that you're going to benefit the most if you've already done the reading, because I'm talking about very specific things in these lectures. I'm going to be talking about specific events, themes, characters, tropes that occur in the text. So if you're not familiar with the text, if you haven't done any of that week's reading yet, my lecture might be a little confusing. You might have trouble following it because I'm assuming that everybody is at least somewhat familiar with the text that we're reading that week before you tune in to my lecture for that week. So I know we're busy and we can't always stay on one set schedule, but if possible, try to really get started on the reading for that week as early as you can, as early in the week as possible. Try to get most of it done maybe by Thursday or Friday so you can watch the lecture maybe around the start of the weekend, and of course you still have time to complete your work. On the weeks where you just have a discussion post to do, you can probably wait until the weekend to tackle that discussion. But if you have the post and a larger assignment, you'll obviously need to put a little more time in to the written work. But you guys know your schedules better than I do. You can sort of figure out, when you have time to get everything done. But while you're in the week 1 module, something else that you can look at is the course syllabus. And I would encourage you guys to take a look at the syllabus. You don't have to do this every week, but here at the start of the class, it's always a good idea to just glance at the syllabus. You're going to find all the usual stuff, my contact information, email, phone number. You can always get in touch with me. We can exchange emails. You can call me. I have my office location and office hours also included at the top of page 1. I am located at the Winnemucca Center of Great Basin College. So if any of you are near Winnemucca, or if you live in town, you can always drop by and talk to me in person. The rest of you will probably use email, but we can also hold video conferences through Zoom if you want to talk in a more extended fashion. If you have, if you want to walk through an assignment, talk a little bit about one of our texts, we can always schedule a video conference. So all of that stuff is on page 1. Also, you'll see the required books on page 1, and there are 7 of them. I'm sorry, that is kind of a high number, but they're all cheap. You can find used copies for most of these. You can find electronic versions of most of these. So you shouldn't have too much trouble finding and purchasing the books. In some cases, you might even be able to rent them rather than buy them. That's certainly fine if you want to go that route. And it's not a huge deal if you don't have all 7 yet. We're not getting to some of them until, October or November. But you really need to have the narrative of Cabeza de Vaca. And like I said, get this edition from the University of Nebraska Press. This is what I ordered through the bookstore. You don't have to go through the GBC bookstore. You can use other online sellers, but just make sure you're getting the edition right. Make sure the cover looks like this, because this is a really good, recent, scholarly edition of the text with explanatory footnotes and a really good critical introduction that we are going to lean on as we get started on this book. So if you have any questions about any of the books, let me know. But we start with Cabeza de Vaca. Our next required book is The Coquette. Okay, you should see that on the list, followed by Hope Leslie, Edgar Huntley. These are titles now, not author names. These are titles. Hope Leslie, Edgar Huntley, Benito Cereno, and then Leaves of Grass and Blake. Those are the 7 required books. Make sure to get them all. And if you have any problems or questions, like I said, just let me know, because we need to get the book squared away. One quick mention in terms of The Coquette, there is a free version online that you guys can read if you're trying to save a few bucks. I've actually linked you to it whenever it is that we get to The Coquette. I think that might be week 4 or week 5. But you can see for yourselves if you take a look at that syllabus. So like I said, page 1, standard stuff, contact info, required materials. You can also take a look at all of the assignments. They're listed, course policies, all that good stuff. But if you go down to page 4, that's the most important part of the syllabus. That's where you can find our detailed class schedule, starting on page 4 of that syllabus document. That's really what I want you guys to save, is the schedule, because that's where you see everything that we're doing over the course of the semester. All of our reading assignments, all of our major assignments, all the deadlines, and you can see, our progression on a week-to-week basis. So if you miss a little bit of time, if you're out of town, if you're swamped at work and you sort of have to take a week off from your coursework, you can always consult that schedule and see what you missed. You can see what we're doing that week or the next week or what we did the previous week. And that way you can catch up or do whatever it is that you need to do. All right. So also, if you want to work ahead, I only publish the modules in Web Campus 1 week at a time. But if you want to work ahead, that schedule inside the syllabus will allow you to do that. So let me know after you've looked over the syllabus, just let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything in there that you're not clear about, and I'm happy to talk more with you. So let's talk about our written assignments. We don't have a ton in this class. We spend the bulk of our time reading. So again, as you guys are getting organized and as you're kind of figuring out your schedule, make sure you're blocking off some time to read. That's your number one priority most weeks. You gotta read. And we'll talk a little bit more about the reading load at the end of this lecture as I kind of get you ready for our first book. But now let's talk about the major types of written assignments that we're going to be doing, because this is pretty straightforward. We have those discussion posts that I've already mentioned. We do those on a weekly basis for the most part. Near the end of the semester, I'll start to lighten up and you guys can escape the discussion board a little bit more often. I want everybody to do at least 10 discussion posts over the course of the semester. Okay, they are worth a total of 100 points. So I'm building in a little bit of flexibility here. If you're swamped on a particular week and you're not able to post, you will have chances to kind of make up for that later. You'll get some additional posting opportunities. But for the people who are staying on top of our discussions and they're posting pretty much every week, you guys will be able to sort of take a break, like I said, at the end of the semester and focus on some of our end of semester work. But for the most part, at least through the first half, or at least maybe really more the first like 3/4 of the class, we're pretty much posting every week. And these are designed to be informal, pretty conversational. I'm trying to replicate the experience of having in-class discussions. And obviously we don't have those in an online class. But the discussion board gives us a chance to talk to one another. It gives you a chance to respond to some of your classmates. I will give you guys specific prompts to respond to. So these aren't totally open-ended. I want you to answer my questions, but you can do that in a lot of different ways. My questions are pretty broad, so you can take your own approach. You can be pretty conversational and informal, but I do want some substance. So I want at least a couple of well-developed paragraphs. I don't just want a sentence or two. I want some real substance. I want, more than anything, evidence that you guys are reading. I don't like to do reading quizzes. I don't like to do that kind of Mickey Mouse stuff where I'm basically trying to catch anybody not doing the work. Instead, the discussion board is your chance to show me and your classmates that you are engaged with the text, you are thinking about the text, you are generating some original thought about the text. And it's not about being 100% right. It's not about understanding everything perfectly. And in some cases, you might be posting before you're 100% finished with the text. That's okay. I just want to see effort. I want to see thought. I want to see engagement. And like I said, I would love for you guys to talk to one another. Over the course of the semester, you need to respond to at least 3 of your classmates' posts. So you don't have to respond every week, but at least 3 times you should over the course of the semester. And of course, if you want to respond more than that, that's fine. So the discussion posts are the shortest, easiest thing that we're doing, but I will read them. Occasionally, I'll jump on there and make a few comments, but the discussion board is mostly for you guys, so I would like you to sort of take ownership of it. We also have 3 short critical response papers. So think of these as mini essays. These are usually about, 3 pages in length, and you get a chance to talk at length about whatever text you want to discuss. So you have to pick something that we've read, obviously, but you're free to choose anything that we've covered in that particular unit. Okay, so we have some basic units in our schedule. You guys can see that on the syllabus. And at the end of each one of those units, which are kind of organized by historical sort of time period, at the end of each one of those units, you're going to be doing a response, right? I think we have 4 units, but at the end of the 4th unit, we're doing our final paper. So at the end of Unit 1, the end of Unit 2, and then the end of Unit 3, that's when we have our 3 critical response papers. So these are pretty short, but I want to see real analysis. Okay, these are mini essays, so the tone should be more formal than what we see in the discussion posts, okay? The structure should be tighter. They should be more argumentative. You should be advancing original interpretations, and you should be conducting original analysis, okay? And they're really kind of rehearsals, they're practice sessions getting you ready for our final paper, our seminar paper, which is due at the end of the semester. Let's not think too much about it yet, but yes, it's long, it involves research, you have to write a proposal for it. We're going to talk about it a lot more as the semester goes on, but that will be due at the very end along with our final exam. So we do have one test, and hopefully one test only in this class, and that will be the cumulative final exam. We'll talk more about that as well. Don't stress. If you read everything, you'll do fine. That's how I designed the test. So if you keep up with the reading, you should have no problem with the exam. The final paper will be harder. It's worth more points, and I want you to devote more time to it. But we'll talk a lot more about it, and I'll give you plenty of time at the end of the semester to work on it. All right, so that's pretty much it. Again, take a look at the course syllabus. Take a look at everything I posted in the week 1 module. But just a final thought about reading and the reading load. If you look at the schedule, you'll notice that we typically have to move through everything that we read in the period of 1 week. Now, the exception to that, there's maybe 2 exceptions to that. The first is Cabeza de Vaca. We're going to spend 2 weeks on him. And the reason is largely based on sort of in the sort of beginning of the semester, struggles that many of us have. We might not all have the book yet. We might not be quite ready to get started here on Monday. That is typical. I know there's often some moving parts and some weird stuff going on at the beginning of a semester. So it's okay if you're not starting this first book until late this week. But by the end of next week, you need to be finished with it. Okay, so we're spending the first 2 weeks on it, but then by week 3, we're moving on to new material. But if you look at the course schedule, you can start making some decisions about your reading schedule based on what we're doing. So some weeks the reading load is pretty light. So in week 3, for example, we're tackling some Native American folk tales and an excerpt from another expedition narrative that's somewhat similar to Cabeza de Vaca, but that's a pretty light week. So it might be a good idea to work a little bit ahead. Or if you're straggling a bit, if you haven't finished the narrative of Cabeza de Vaca at the end of week 2, the good news is you can definitely finish it during week 3 because we don't have a ton of other reading that week. And then in week 4, we're just doing poetry. We have a lot of individual poems to read, but most of them are short. So that's a pretty light week. And then we get to week 5 and we read The Coquette. That's a short novel. It might not take you the entire week to read it. But see, here's the catch. Here's the other side of the equation. In week 6, I might be 1 week off here, but in either week 6 or week 7, we get to Edgar Huntley, and then right after that, we get to Hope Leslie, 2 longer novels. Edgar Huntley isn't super long in terms of length, but it's a difficult read. It's a lot more difficult than The Coquette. The Coquette's fun and kind of breezy, and it's short. Edgar Huntley takes a lot more energy. The prose is dense, the author is weird, and we have to really navigate several obstacles there. So it might take you a little bit longer than 1 week to finish Edgar Huntley. That's okay. It might take you longer than 1 week to finish Hope Leslie, because that's a pretty lengthy novel. It's okay. If some of that reading spills over into the next week, that's not the end of the world, but you need to keep at it. Don't put a book down for weeks thinking that you might come back to it later. You're probably not going to have time. All right. But the way I've structured our schedule, there is the possibility for some spillover. Not every week is created equal. Some weeks we have a lot to get through. Other weeks are going to be lighter. Once we get to week 10, we have a bunch of short excerpts, nothing really long and dense. So if you're playing catch up still, by that point, again, you'll have time to finish up whatever you're not quite finished with. So just keep that in mind. Don't stress if it takes you a little bit longer to finish a book than what's on the schedule. Just stay on top of things as best you can. And if you really think you're falling behind, reach out to me. Let's talk, let's devise a plan, and we can figure it out. But I know, I do get a lot of complaints about the reading load. I know it's intense, I know it's heavy, but there's no other way for us to conduct this class. If this was a 200 level class or a 300 level class, we would be reading less. But you guys are advanced English students. For better or worse, you are advanced, you are experienced, so you can handle the reading load. I know you can. It will be a challenge, but remember that I'm here to help. And if you're falling behind or if you're struggling with anything, let's talk. And I can get you caught up. I guarantee it. So as long as you guys get into a weekly routine of reading the overview, watching my lecture, keeping up with the reading, and then doing all of the assignments that are due that week, you should be in good shape. I can guarantee good results if you put in the time, if you put in the effort. Not all of our work is going to be top-notch all of the time. That's okay. If I see effort, if I see original thought, then we will get there. It might take some revision, it might take some trial and error, but we will get to the finish line. But I can't carry you there. You got to put in the work. This is a difficult class, but I hope it's also rewarding. And I try to make it as fun and interesting as possible. So if you have any questions, let me know. And please tune back into the second part of the week 1 lecture. That's where we get started on the narrative of Cabeza de Vaca.